Okay, so here's my pencil sketch that I just very quickly roughed in. It was a very small thumbnail, just to quickly block out composition. You can see I went into Photoshop and I made a very simple line drawing version, so I can use that as just as a guide for when I'm roughing this in. I sort of picture a sort of a tropical environment with some big sort of sci-fi type of buildings blocked in, and I just quickly up my image size to 4096 pixels wide, and this is a resolution that I like to work at just because it's double film res, and so it gives you a lot of room to really get in there and detail things out. So I'm just sort of filling in a basic sky blue color, and I just used the quick mask with the gradient to lighten up the bottom of the sky. Now, when you are doing these type of gradients, as things get closer to the horizon, besides daytime often getting lighter, they often get desaturated and push a little bit more towards yellow. So I'm using the quick mask gradient again to lighten the left side, because our sun is going to be off camera, but it is off to the left. So we're going to have some fairly strong lighting coming from the left. Going back to adjust our bottom again. So I'm going to make that a bit more cyan. Spending time here is really good because a lot of our things really do key off the sky. All right, so we're just going to notice how we're doing a tighter gradient just to adjust the portion right on the horizon. So you can see I'm really desaturating that because that's where a lot of haze and dust and atmosphere has collected, is right on the horizon. So we just desaturate that even further. So as you can see, a blue sky is really just a very simple blue sky. There are some complex gradients to think about. So I'm just adjusting the left side again, just a bit brighter, and also a tiny bit warmer. Bringing down the right side, I did that by selecting inverse, and that's Command Shift I on a Mac. It's probably Control Shift I on a PC. So we're just calling up a new layer, just kind of a warmer, desaturated tone. We're just gonna start blocking in the clouds. And you notice I didn't go pure white. It's a very common mistake to really just kind of go with very saturated, bright colors. But we're going with something that's fairly muted, but still bright, just to start blocking in these shapes. And you can see for the shadow tone, I went with a darker blue, but nowhere near saturated as the blue of the sky, because it is the shadow side of a fairly white object. So I'm just using a big fat, it's actually I think called a chalk brush in Photoshop, just a very standard brush. I'm just keeping it very large just to block in shapes. I'm keeping in mind our light direction coming from the left, so all the highlights are going to be on the left side of these clouds. So I'm going for, now I'm starting to try and find my distant hill tone. So I went with a very desaturated blue, sort of like a steel gray. Just I'm picturing how the green is mixing with the blue of the environment, or with the blue of the atmosphere. So I'm also starting to block in some of the highlight tones. In the distance, because the contrast is so low because of atmospheric perspective, we have very little value difference between our highlight and shadow. It's more of a hue difference, more of a color shift. And as we get closer, things will tend to get more contrasty. So you can see as I'm starting to block in the hills and mountains that are closer towards us, I have chosen a darker, slightly more saturated green. So now for the highlight tone, I'm going for a bit more yellowy, a bit warmer. It's also a bit brighter. So now we're having both a color difference and a value difference. So now it's going for a little more of a cyan color because I'm starting. I just called up a new layer, and I'm just blocking in the basic water. Water's not a perfect reflection of the sky, and also because this is tropical, I really kind of wanted that really sort of nice cyan, sort of tropical water, very rich and blue. So let's quickly rough that in. But yeah, now I'm just adding a bit of color variation. I'm going with a bit more of a green than a yellow highlight, just so it's not so monochromatic. Just add a slight bit of color variation. So now for the foreground, I went with a very dark green. This is all going to be pretty much a silhouette, and this whole foreground island is going to be mainly in shadow because the light's coming from the left. And so we're going to use some of these shapes to silhouette against a brighter background, such as the palm tree on the left. but part of the beach will be in light, which is kind of what we're showing here. So we're just going to start putting in the cast shadow. For that beach, I actually just did a slightly warmer version of the sky tone. Even though it is a different material, it's kind of nice to create color harmony by at least basing colors on other areas of the painting. So in this water layer, I'm just blocking in some dark areas to imply a reflection. Just doing a quick save. This part of the painting goes very, very fast. It's more just blocking out shapes, composition, color. Because we have the pencil sketch, we kind of had composition figured out, but now we're just trying to figure out a color palette. And composition will change a little bit as we go. So here I'm just blocking in some of the distant beaches. Now in order to get those perfectly horizontal straight lines, you can draw a horizontal line and hold down the Shift key, and that will give you a perfectly horizontal line, or if you're going vertically, it'll work vertically. So I'm just taking a smaller brush and just scribbling just the implication of details. Now we aren't going to go overboard in the sketch because we know we're going to replace most of this with photo elements. So right now it's more just for ourselves, just so we can plan out where all the items are going to go. So you can see we're just different types of variation here with a bit more of an orangey highlight, just so it's not all the same green. Just to imply that there's different types of vegetation, and it really just gives a richness to your work. If you only use the same green or the same blue over your entire paint, it's going to look like you just use kind of like straight out of the tube type of colors, and it's really not going to have much interest. But as you can see in those distant colors, I'm keeping right in the middle of the color picker. Everything it's pretty desaturated. It's pretty neutral. So it is really just subtle color shifts in the background. So we called up a new layer, and now we're just going to block in these buildings. We aren't going to spend much time on blocking these in at all, because I know I am going to use photos, and I do have specific photos in mind. So we're mainly just trying to place them, and I picture them. I want them to be fairly light, fairly airy, just to go with this tropical environment, because I really don't want there to be too much. I don't want oppressive type of architecture. It's supposed to be sort of a light, happy scene. And now I'm as water gets shallower, it picks up more of the white of the sand, and so it tends to get very, very bright and rich, especially in the tropics. So I'm really going sort of a bright cyan right along the beaches. Using that Shift key again, so I can get those vertical lines. And I'm just quickly blocking in just the implication of some detail and some shapes, basically just to show where the corners are, where I picture shadows being. I sort of picture these buildings sort of going up and over these mountains, but still being fairly skinny. So we're just gradually. Just gradually tightening up all this detail. We're keeping it to a very, very minimum number of layers here, just because we don't want to get bogged down. We just want this to be a very fast, simple painting process. We'll have plenty of time to deal with lots of layers later. So now we just quickly flip the canvas horizontally, just so that we can evaluate our composition and see if it's balanced and if it's working. So right now we're just blocking in this foreground palm tree. And I was very careful when I placed this in my sketch, because I really wanted this sort of dark silhouetted palm tree to play against the large, bright expanse of that mountainside. Notice that my focal building is not dead center. I don't want this to be a perfectly boring composition, so I'm just trying to keep it a little off balance, but I mean, a little off center, but still keep a nice balanced composition that leads the eye through the painting. So I'm just adding a bit of color variation to some of these buildings. This really doesn't mean that much. In fact, I'm going to tone this down because I picture them being a bit more monochromatic and not quite as reddish. I just was trying to get a bit of color variation in there. Let's go with smaller brush, just implying detail. We aren't really concerned about designing these buildings right now. Most of them are just going to be photo based anyway, but we're mainly concerned just the overall idea. Now, then this type of sketch typically just take an hour or two, sometimes longer, but it's basically just to show your client, just to show where you are headed with the painting, and it's really easy to make changes at this stage, just because you really haven't invested that much. So it's good to have a whole round of revisions at this stage, and really get everyone happy with the sketch, so that when you move forward on the final map painting, you aren't wasting your time and their time. Just adding a bit more of that cyan. Starting to imply a bit of shadow coming from these islands on the water. People tend to forget that water is a surface and does receive light and shadow, though in slightly different ways than most objects. But you can see how we're having the cast shadow from our big foreground chunk of land casting on both the sand and the water. I'm just trying to show how that beach curves around into perspective. And you may notice that I'm changing my brush size just on the fly as I'm painting, and this is done by hitting the bracket keys up and down. Will change your brush size, and this really speeds things up, especially when you're doing these very fast paintings. So yeah, we're just continuing to refine the beaches and the islands. A bit more of a desaturated yellowy tone. Still dark, just to give that the trunk of the palm tree just a little bit of difference in color. Now we're sampling right off the sky and painting very lightly to sort of imply a rocky sort of texture to these mountains, because we don't want them just to be solid green. It's nice to have this breakup of rock and vegetation. Now I like to paint with the opacity settings set to the stylus, so that the harder I press, the more opaque the color gets, and this is really useful for sampling off of other areas and then just lightly painting, just to maintain a color balance. I just moved up that bottom of that one island just because I wasn't quite happy with the perspective of it. I want to look pretty far away. Just going over the water again with our brighter cyan color. And where it gets deeper, the water will be darker. Also just trying to keep a few reflections in there, just darker patches below the main mountains. And compositionally, I'm still trying to figure out the sky. I'm just kind of carving away at some of these clouds, and making sure the cloud at the right is not quite so massive. And I'm also just simplifying it a bit. It was a bit fussy and with a lot of brush strokes. I'm just sort of making it more of a big round shape. And as the highlight goes into shadow, you may have noticed I picked up a bit of a warmer color, just because I don't want it to fall from white to blue. I just want, as it turns, just to get a little bit warmer. This isn't quite like a painting done at noon. This is more probably like a 3 or 4 o'clock type of thing. So it's still bright daylight, but it's the light's gone down just a little bit to get a little bit of warmth. Just going back into our city and just simplifying some of the detail and shapes. I'm starting to apply a few rocks in the foreground as well as some of that rocky breakup on the side of the mountain. Just nice to give variation. It also gives us a type of detail to show scale, because if we see if we see this up close here, and then we see the same type of detail much smaller in some of these other mountains, then it really helps us sell that distance. Just darken up the palm tree a little bit because we really want that to read as a silhouette. I'm going to flip our canvas again just to check to see how we're doing. I'm going to apply a few wispies in the sky just to give variety to the sky. So it's not just, these sort of big happy puffy clouds, so that we have a few high wispies as well, just to give it depth and texture. Beefing up some of our shadows in those distant mountains, make them a bit more saturated, a bit more blue. Just try and picture in your head where the light is coming from and how it falls across these surfaces. Trying to figure out, just how the buildings work, just as a large mass. I'm just adding a bit more saturation to those highlights. They were getting just a bit gray for the distance. And you notice I added a cast shadow from those buildings, which is really going to help them sit on the side of that hill. All right, going back to our island layer, and we're just starting to refine some shapes a little bit. And we're just going with a bit of a smaller brush just to imply just a bit more detail. And at this point, this is just very, very fast scribbling. We aren't actually concerned with really making sense of all this detail. It's just to imply detail, so that when we're working on it and adding photos, that the rest of the painting isn't quite so jarring. And this is also just a communication tool to our client to show the type of detail we are intending to put here. Now, I'm taking great care to kind of show that this is a little spit of land that comes out where this sort of foreground building sits on. But at that distance and at this angle, you will actually hardly see anything between it. So I have to be very careful about my perspective. Just a bit of a darker greenish cyan color for the shadow side of my main mountain. And because I am painting with the opacity set to the stylus, I can just paint lighter as I go farther away, so I can get a natural progression into the haze. So I'm starting to scribble in just the idea of a palm tree or two. Going with a nice big soft round brush into our highlights, and we're just kind of simplifying a little bit, just giving it just a bit of a warm wash. With all that scribbling, it was looking a bit fussy. So I just went in and did the whole gradient quick mask thing again, just to darken up the right side just a little bit, just because there will be less light over there. Also gives just a bit of movement to our piece, so the brightest element is on the left. And our eye reads left to right, so it's good that our eye comes and reads left to right. Did I say that backwards? So now we're darkening up our foreground a little bit, just to help bring it forward, and also just to give it depth, because we don't want too much detail seen in this. We want it to be a nice silhouette, but at the same time, we just want our eye just to go right past it, just to look at the main subject of our painting. Now in our buildings, I'm just quickly playing with hue saturation just to desaturate it. So what I did there, I did the colorize toggle on hue saturation. Then I pulled up the fade tool, which is just Shift Command F on a Mac, and then that'll just back off whatever adjustment that I had done. Now, I wasn't really happy with that large cloud, so I just went ahead and just scribbled it out. I didn't want the composition to be too complicated, so that's why I'm just putting in just a few wispies up here. We're probably gonna have a cloud of some sort back there, but I just want just one of those buildings that play nicely against the sky without too much clutter in the sky. So I'm just went with that big soft brush, and just was blocking in some more shadows on those clouds. Now we're gonna flip our canvas back again, and we'll do this quite often, just flipping back and forth just to check ourselves. So I think this cloud is just getting, it's just a bit too big, and it's just dominating the composition just a little bit. And so I just am squashing that down using the free transform tool. Just Command T or Control T on a PC just pulls that up. So I'm just scaling that down, squashing it and stretching it around. And now's the time to deal with all these issues because this is just a sketch phase. And so now I'm putting in just a secondary cloud sort of behind those buildings just to just have those buildings something to play against. Now I'm toying with the idea here of sort of a larger cloud looming overhead, but I just didn't really like that idea. I wanted to keep it very open. So I selected the whole left side of those islands and the buildings, and I'm moving them over just a bit. Mainly because I felt they were crowding our foreground left island. But I'm careful not to put them in the dead center. So now we're just going to go back to our islands, just clean up from doing some of those moves. So now we're going to start thinking about clouds to put in here. So here are some of these reference photos that I've gathered, and some of these will be available on the DVD. Specifically the ones that I use. So here's the sky, or a chunk of cloud. And so right now I'm just going to take the lasso tool and just going to do a quick copy and paste just to get it in the right spot, and we'll worry about extracting it in just a minute. But the main thing is I just want to make sure that this cloud is going to work for our composition. It's lit from the right direction, which is one of the main reasons that I picked it. It also has pretty much the right shape, so this is really a good cloud for us. So I'm going into curves, Command M pulls that up, and I'm just going to try and do a quick color correction. You see I'm just warming it up, and I'm also brightening it a lot. Now curves is an incredibly powerful tool for doing correction, much more so than levels, just because you can set all these different points and adjust your highlights and your shadows separately, as you see me doing here. So here I'm taking out the blue in the highlights, which is adding yellow, and then I'm still keeping it in the shadows. So I'm also lifting my blacks there, as well as adjusting my midpoint. Okay, so I'm getting fairly happy with that. So we're just going to scale it down just a bit more, just kind of get it into place. All right, so now we're going to use the extract filter. It's actually not a filter, but it's under the filter menu. And this pulls up this dialog, and what you do, you actually take a brush and you paint all along the edge you want to extract. And so you do your complete outline, and you can just do kind of a garbage mat on the bottom. You take the paintbrush, or the paint bucket, and then you fill it. And so what it does, it keeps everything you have filled, and along the line you have painted, it will pull a nice mat. And so you can see we have this really nice mat pulled on this cloud. So now we can go back and do some more color correction to match it to our sketch. So just warm it up a little bit, and we sped it up a little bit. But yeah, we're just trying to get a good feel for it, and just trying to help it sit in there. We're bringing down the midtones, keeping the highlights. It's starting to feel pretty good. So using the gradient quick mask, we're going to lighten up the left side a little bit. This left side's looking a little dark compared to what we need. And now we've caught up a layer mask. And we just use the gradient in the layer mask to fade out the bottom of this layer. So now we're just erasing into the layer mask to reveal more of the cloud. So we just called up a new layer, and we're using the gradient to just to give us some distant haze. We're going to put that layer at 50% just so that it affects it mildly. Okay, now we just went to layer matting defringe. Now what this does, this will take off, like if you have like a subtle border, whether it be like a black border from pulling a mat or white, or it just really cleans up the edges. It's a great little tool. It's not perfect, but it'll definitely get you some of the way. So now we're going back into our original cloud paint layer and just erasing the area around our new cloud so that we just see our nice new cloud against a clean sky. So now we're going to find a new chunk for the for the top of this cloud. You can see we still have some paint sticking up on the right. So I think this cloud will work out well for us. So here's a different type of extraction method. I have duplicated the channel that has the most contrast. And going into curves, I'm making a very high contrast matte of that channel. And this is a very effective tool if you have a lot of high contrast in your image. This is a great way to pull a matte. And the key is just clicking through the channels to find the right channel. And so then you just make that channel a selection, and you just copy and paste off of your image, which is what I've done right here. So now we have a lot of color correction to do. That was a very blue photo. So we've brightened that up, and we're significantly warming it up to help it sit into our scene. And you can see here we have quite a bit of edge junk that we're gonna have to clean up. But first we're just gonna try and get the color to sit in. We have a lot of slop at the bottom, but we're just gonna fade that out. Okay, so we just made a selection of that layer. We're going to expand it by a pixel. And now we select inverse, and so we have just erased 1 pixel around the edge. So now we're going to go into defringe. And you can see how that takes off some of that edge junk. Okay, now we're adding a layer mask, so then we can use a nice big soft brush to clean up the bottom and to get a nice blend into the cloud that we already have. So we're kind of trying to place it according to our sketch because we're fairly happy with that. And with this type of cloud, we can just do a nice soft blend. These shapes will blend very nicely into one another. So now I'm using the dodge tool, and I'm just going in, especially around the edges of this bright white cloud, just brightening them up a little bit. They're a bit dark. So I'm still just doing a lot of little minor adjustments. A lot of people think they need to color correct it all in one shot, but oftentimes I will open up that curves dialog a dozen times just to get it right. Okay, so now we're calling up hue saturation again, and we're going to use the colorize tab just because that will completely make our cloud monochromatic in whatever hue we choose. And we're going to keep that very desaturated, and we're going to call up the fade function again just to back that off, just so that we're adding just a little bit of that color in. And it's a really helpful way to balance a lot of different objects. Now we're going to go back into the dodge tool and just clean up some of those edges again. Just brighten them in. And so here we have the rest of our sky. Now we have used a lot of those same techniques, actually just those exact same techniques to pull mats on different clouds. We have added wispies, just all using the channel select function as we showed, where you pick a channel with very high contrast, or using the extract tool under the filters menu. And so we've pretty much just followed our sketch, and then just continue to block in the rest of the sky.